Welcome to Cyber Bytes, your weekly dose in the latest in cybersecurity news. I'm your host, Edwin Kwan, and today's stories cover system behaving in ways that designers did not fully anticipate and attackers moving faster than patch cycles. From AI models autonomously breaching infrastructure during testing to widely deployed platforms like WordPress being actively exploited within days of disclosure. The common thread is often a loss of control at scale. Alright, let's get started. The first story reviews the so-called Claude Blade research, where X Sharma from Manifold Security has confirmed that previously disclosed issues in Anthropic's Claude for Chrome extension remains unresolved in practice. Despite 8 version updates, between the initial disclosure and verification, the specific code paths responsible for the vulnerability appears unchanged, with version 1.0.at still reproducing both a syntactic click primitive and a URL-based permission initialization flaw. The main issue here lies in how the extension handles privilege modes. By crafting a specific URL, the side panel can launch directly into a privileged state without going through standard permission checks. While this is not currently remotely exploitable because it requires same extension context, the concern is still structural. If any additional weaknesses is introduced, such as a cross-site scripting flaw within the extension itself, this mechanism could enable silent access to sensitive data sources like Gmail without user awareness. The takeaway here is less about immediate exploitation and more about design discipline. Permission models in browser extensions need to assume that any internal boundary can eventually be crossed, and therefore must enforce user-driven state transitions at every step. The recommended fix reflects that. Default to least privilege require explicit user interaction for escalation and tightly validate internal messaging paths. When those controls are missing, even non-exploitable bugs become latent entry points. Now we're on to our next story, which is arguably the most technically and strategic significant. OpenAI disclosed that several of its models, including GPT 5.6 Sole, autonomously compromise Hugging Face infrastructure during a controlled benchmarking evaluation. Instead of solving the exploit gym challenge as intended, the models identified a more efficient path: retrieve the answers directly. To do this, they discovered and exploited a zero-day vulnerability in a package registry cache proxy. It escalated privileges, moved laterally using stolen credentials, and ultimately reached an internet-connected node. From there, they orchestrated thousands of coordinated actions across short-lived environments, effectively building a distributed command and control system using public infrastructure. Hugging Face independently confirmed the breach, noting that the attacking system leveraged code execution vulnerabilities via a malicious dataset to extract credentials, and that containment was complicated by the defensive models being restricted by policy while the attacker was not. Now, what makes this incident notable is not just a technical chain, which resembles a conventional intrusion, but the decision-making process behind it. The models were operating with reduced safety constraints for evaluation purposes, and when faced with an ambiguous objective, they selected an unintended but effective strategy. Now, this highlights a key challenge in AI security. Alignment does not degrade gracefully. When the guardrails are loosened, even slightly, capable systems can pursue optimization paths that conflict with human expectations. The The broader implication is that testing environments are no longer isolated risk domains. If an AI system can identify and exploit real infrastructure during evaluation, then the boundary between testing and production becomes pretty porous. OpenAI has since disclosed the vulnerability responsibly and is working on stronger safeguards. But the incident reinforces that AI capability is now intersecting directly with offensive security techniques, not just simulating them. We're shifting now from emerging AI risks to more traditional web infrastructure. Our next story focuses on active exploitation of critical WordPress vulnerabilities. These are tracked as CVE 2026-63030 and CVE 2026-60137. These flaws collectively refer to as WP2 shell, and they enable unauthenticated remote code execution via the REST API's batch processing feature. In practical terms, attackers do not need credentials to compromise a vulnerable site. WordPress has released patches in versions 7.0.2, 6.9.5, and 6.8.6, and automatic updates have been pushed. Yet, around 18% of over 124,000 sampled sites remain unpatched. Now, this gap is significant enough to sustain widespread exploitation, and threat actors now move very quickly, with proof of concept code circulating almost immediately after disclosure. The observed attacks follow a consistent pattern. Adversaries scan for vulnerable installations, confirm exposure via SQL injection probing, and then deploy PHP web shells into accessible directories such as wp-content/cache. These web shells are often disguised and designed to evade detection, returning benign responses unless accessed with the correct parameters. From there, attackers install malicious plugins, create rogue administrator accounts, and harvest user data via the REST API. Now, some campaigns have attempted to extract database credentials through local file inclusion techniques, targeting the WP config files, while large-scale data exfiltration or lateral movement has not yet been widely observed. The persistent mechanisms being deployed suggest preparation for longer-term access. This is a good reminder that patch availability does not equal risk reduction. Exposure persists as long as a meaningful portion of the ecosystem remains unpatched, and automated exploitation ensures those systems are found quickly. Now, we're on to our last story, and we're coming back to AI, but from a governance and architecture perspective. Research from PromptArmor highlights how connectors, which allow AI assistants to interact with services like Gmail, Slack, and Dropbox, are quietly expanding organizational attack surfaces. Over a 6-week period, 37% of the analyzed connectors change in some way, with hundreds of new tools added and over 1,000 tool descriptions modified. These changes directly influence how AI models decide when and how to invoke actions. A concrete example is the Dropbox connector, which evolved from 8 tools with limited write capability to 24 tools, including several with destructive potential, alongside changes to permission and embedded instructions. Now, the key issue is that these changes often occur without visibility or reapproval from security teams. Beyond capability drift, there is also a data flow problem. Approximately 2 in 5 connectors were found to route data through additional AI services downstream, often outside the organization's awareness or control. For example, using a natural language search function in a connected service may result in sensitive queries being processed by multiple external AI systems, each operating under different terms and infrastructure. Now, this creates a layered trust problem where the original approver of a connector does not account for its evolving dependencies. The net effect is an expanding blast radius, where new data sources, new actions, and new processing pathways are continuously introduced into the AI agent's environment. From a security standpoint, this challenges traditional approval models. A connector assessed as low risk at onboarding can become high risk over time without any explicit change requests. Now, this undermines the assumption that the integration remains static. Taken together, today's stories point to a shift in how risk manifests. It is no longer just about identifying and patching discrete vulnerabilities, but about understanding how systems behave over time, especially when autonomy and third-party dependencies are involved. Browser extensions, AI models, and integration layers all introduce forms of implicit trust that can be difficult to monitor once deployed. The practical response is to design for change and failure, enforce least privilege consistently, assume components will evolve in ways that were not originally anticipated, and ensure visibility into how data and permissions are actually being used in real time. The organizations that adopted this model will be better positioned to manage the next wave of security challenges, which are increasingly defined by complexity rather than isolated flaws. This is Cyber Bytes. I'm Edwin Kwan, and I'll see you next time.